Hey everybody, Ian here. So happy February 3rd. Welcome to day 3 of my rom-com reviews. The movie I watched today was 10 Things I Hate About You from 1999, starring Heath Ledger and Julia Stiles. This was a very cute movie. This was good. This was solid. I liked it better than Knocked Up, which I liked. But I didn't like it as much as I liked Crazy Stupid Love. The plot of this movie is that there are two sisters. There's a younger, popular one who is just everyone adores her. Wears her mom's pearls and cute wholesome dresses. And then there's the older, more standoffish one who. And when I say like standoffish, she's very like rude, and she's like openly hostile to anyone that talks to her. And their dad has a rule that, well, because their mom ran out on them years ago, and so they only would live with their dad, and that's mentioned several times, but it's not really discussed in it's not really explored. But they live with their dad, who has this rule that said, and I'm not sure why, but he has this rule saying that, like, well, one of you cannot date unless both of you are dating, which is kind of a weird rule. But the younger one wants to date, but the older one doesn't. And so Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who wants to date the younger sister, decides to pay Heath Ledger, who's a bad boy in the school, to date the older sister, so that Joseph Gordon-Levitt can date the younger sister. And it some things work, some things go right. It's a good movie, but that's the general plot, is that they have to date. This one couple has to date so that the other couple can date. One thing I found interesting about this movie was that like I said, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who is adorable in this movie. Oh my gosh, this looks like it might have been like his first movie, maybe, because he was so cute. And he had nice fluffy hair and like freckles. He's just adorable. But like I said, Joseph Gordon-Levitt is the driving force of the plot. His character and his motivations are the reason that the movie is happening. He wants to date the girl, and so sets up her sister with this other guy. But 80% of the movie is focused on Heath Ledger and Julia Stiles, which is good because they're a more charismatic couple and they're more interesting, frankly. The wholesome younger sister and Joseph Gordon-Levitt are pretty... A movie about them might not have been as compelling than a movie about, a bad boy and I guess kind of a bad girl. She's not a bad girl. She doesn't wear a leather jacket, walking around smoking. She actually hates smoking. But she's just she's angry, she's anti-authority, she only wants to do what people aren't expecting. She's actually very obnoxious at several points throughout the movie. And I had a very polarizing view on her, on Julia Stiles' character. It was half the time I was like, what the fuck are you doing? Why are you saying that? Why are you so rude? Why are you XYZ? And the other half of the time I was like, yes, points are being made. And so I had it was a lot of wild swings back and forth in terms of how much I liked her character. But this was a good movie. This was a very cute movie. This was very sweet and good. It wasn't as realistic in the way that I think Crazy Stupid Love was a very real movie, but this was very good, like, escapist art. And it had good writing. The thing about the writing is that sometimes there would be lines or maybe a whole scene that felt underdeveloped, or maybe just a bit one-dimensional. It felt like they needed to, go back over this line or go back over this scene and just kind of not necessarily even add to it. Nothing else necessarily needs to happen. It's just that they need to... This isn't a line from this movie, but this is just an example of one-dimensional writing if a character says, "Oh, I could never do this," and then the other character says, "Oh, yes, you can," and then the first one says, "You're right, I can." Nothing else needs to, they just need to do a better, more realistic job of those two having a conversation. They don't need to they don't need to do something else. It just needs to be deeper, less one dimensional. And there were just some parts of this scattered throughout that just felt one dimensional. Sometimes it would be a whole scene, sometimes it would be an interaction between two characters, sometimes it would be just a single line that just felt like it needed more development and more drafts of that. And the acting was solid. There were a couple people here and there who were kind of maybe stiff a little bit, but among the main 4 or 5 kids was good. Kids, they're probably all like 20. They were solid and they had good chemistry and they were charismatic. Particularly Heath Ledger and Julia Stiles together were very good. That was a good casting choice on whoever was the casting director. The directing itself was, this is one thing I don't know much about directing, and so it's hard for me to judge, like, oh, that, I can't just walk away from a movie saying, like, oh, that was well directed, unless there's something particularly standing out in the way that, like, Crazy Stupid Love did. There was nothing that there were very few things that were particularly like, oh, like I walked away remembering that specifically in the way that I had with Crazy Stupid Love. Again, I'm glad I watched that one first and can compare all these other ones to what I think was a very well-made rom-com. How long am I into this? Okay. But the directing, it didn't seem like there was anything wrong with it. There weren't any parts where I was thinking like, oh, they should, pull back a little more so that we can see XYZ. It felt like everything was framed fine, everything was shot well, but there weren't a whole lot of particularly impactful shots or significant shots. When I say significant, like significant to the story. One example of that would be, this is from Crazy Stupid Love. I know I promised in my knocked up video that I wouldn't be talking about Crazy Stupid Love so much, but if you watched my Crazy Stupid Love review, you might remember that I was talking about the opening scene was this, it's at a fancy restaurant and it's showing all these couples on their dates, except it's only showing from like the table down. You can only see, their pants and skirts and their shoes. And it's showing all these well-dressed couples. Nice high heels, pantyhose, good skirts, nice slacks, all this stuff. Shows like 5 or 6 different couples, and then the last one it ends on is Steve Carell and Julianne Moore, the main couple of the movie. And when it ends on them, she's very dressed up, and he's wearing like baggy pants and like old dirty New Balance sneakers. And so it was very telling from right away from the first scene that, like, okay, the problem is that he has given up. That was a significant shot, and there weren't significant shots in this movie that were particularly telling. That being said, there were some interesting sequences in this movie that mainly involved camera movement, I noticed. One of them was, at one point in the movie, they throw a party, because it's a high school movie, of course they throw a party. I just got an email. But the way that they advertise it is that they throw a bunch of... sorry, I just got a text too. Too much is happening all at once. They print off a bunch of flyers for it, bright yellow flyers, saying, party tonight at whatever house. And then they go into the stairwell, which is all white. White stairs, white handrails, white walls. And it's one of those stairwells. It's not just one flight of stairs. It's like 4 or 5 all going around the shot of the camera, which is straight up to the ceiling. And this shot is that they just drop them all down into the stairwell, and so they're all floating down. And at the same time, the camera is like spinning around. I'm not even sure if it was moving closer to the to the papers as it was falling down, but the papers were moving closer to the camera for sure because they're falling down in gravity. You can talk to Isaac Newton if you have a problem with that. I think he's still alive. Pretty sure. But yeah, that was just an interesting shot. I enjoyed watching that. It was a cool visual, but again, not significant in that it didn't tell us anything about the story. It didn't reveal anything about the characters. It didn't drive the plot in any way. It was just interesting. And there was another one that I was actually at the party that they had been advertising. They have several very long takes where they're going from just kind of scenario to scenario to scenario in this party of like 100 people, and it's all just in one take and just kind of going through this party. And I thought that was interesting. It felt like the audience was actually at this party walking through it. And that was interesting, and I enjoyed that and appreciated that. Again, not particularly, it didn't tell the audience anything. It didn't move anything particularly forward. One reason I like that scene also is because it had a lot of funny, just kind of background characters who never really have lines at school, but they're just kind of at the party having fun, and they're funny. One thing I did like about this movie, though, was the music. It was lots of kind of like alternatives, not quite grunge, but definitely alternative, definitely, the 90s rock. Very lively, very spirited, just very fun, and somehow felt very, I'm not quite sure how exactly, but felt very, very fitting for the movie. And actually the movie, when it started, it automatically felt very 90s because they had this alternative music playing in the opening credits, but also the opening credits, like all the the titles and people's names, they would be kind of like scribbled on, like Heath Ledger, Julia Stiles, etc. And yeah, that just felt very, very 90s, very cute, very I guess at this point retro. I guess the 90s are retro at this point. It's been over 20 years since it was the 1990s. One thing I've been doing, let me see how, okay, I won't go too much longer. One thing I've been doing lately is, or yesterday and today, I've been making kind of a rubric for these movies because I want to give them a kind of a standardized rating, even though it's still going to be like subjective. It's going to be my feelings on it. But what I'm doing is I'm going to give each movie a rating out of 10. And I'm going to divide this rubric into 5 different categories. I'm going to look at the writing, the acting, the directing, the music, and just the general vibe of the movie. And so what I gave this movie, I gave it a 1.6 out of 2 for the writing because I really liked a lot of the dialogue. My baseline seems to be kind of 1.5, and I go up or down based on what happens. I don't start at 0 and build up. I start at 1.5 out of 2 and build up or down. Dig up, stupid. Sorry, that's from The Simpsons. Yeah, because I don't think you can build something down. Anyway, I liked a lot of the dialogue in the movie. It would be really funny and interesting, but then there were these other parts that were very, like I was saying earlier, just one-dimensional and felt like they needed more development, and so it would kind of, the dialogue and these interesting words would make it spike up to maybe 1.9, but then these one-dimensional characters and scenes would bring it back down to 1.2, and so I was like, okay, I feel like 1.6, because overall I liked the writing. But it just needed work. But so I gave that a 1.6 out of 2. I gave the acting a 1.3 out of 2. They were, like I said, they were good. The 2 leads were good, and they had very good chemistry together, and they were believable as a couple that is not quite right for each other, but at the same time perfect for each other. I think that's a good way to describe them. They were very believable and gave good performances, and they were funny. But all the actors were very young, and it's hard, I think, for younger people to always be a good actor, just because it's so much of acting, I think, has to do with putting yourself in other people's shoes and really empathizing. And the younger you are, the fewer experiences you've had, I think the harder it is to truly empathize and put yourself in someone else's shoes. I think these were all people who Heath Ledger, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, they got better and better at acting as their careers progressed. I don't know much about Julia Stiles, but I know her name. And so I assume that she, after she turned, 21 and 22, 20, 30, etc., she also continued to improve. I gave the directing a 1.5 out of 2 just because, like I was saying, I don't know much about directing, and if 1.5 is my baseline, I'm just kind of looking for stuff that would really stand out to me as being particularly poor or particularly good. But if it's just generally average, I'm probably going to stick with 1.5 out of 2 for a lot of the directing. Hopefully I can get better at this as this month goes, and just later in life. I gave the music a 1.7 out of 2 because I liked the music, and it was very fitting, and it was very fun. It was lively. Some of it would be kind of cheesy when they would start. It was very predictable that, like, this didn't happen, but, she's running down the stairs crying right when, the sad, alternative song starts, and it's kind of like, okay, that's a little tropey. That exact thing didn't happen, but there were several times when the music would start, I was like, okay, that's a little corny. And then the general vibe, which is just totally 100% subjective, I gave a 1.8 out of 2. Like I said, it was very good escapist material. Very sweet, very fun, very wholesome, very, very light, very brightly colored. It was good. It was very solid. But the total score out of 10, 1.6 plus 1.3 plus 1.5 plus 1.7 plus 1.8 is it's a 7.9 out of 10, which when I added all this up, I was like, yeah, that feels right. It doesn't feel like it's above an 8.0, even though I know it's a classic and a lot of people love this movie, understandably so, because it's very cute and good. It didn't feel like it quite excelled in the way that it needed to, in the ways that it would need to in order to boost above an 8.0. But I liked it better than Knocked Up, which I liked, but this was better. For me, at least. My favorite character... How am I doing? Okay, I'll end this soon. My favorite character was Allison Janney. She briefly showed up as she was a guidance counselor in the beginning, and they show her computer several times, the laptop she's working on, and she's writing like an erotic novel at this just in her office at the high school. And she's, at one point she's like, what's another word for like engorged? Because I assume she's going to say something about, this character is engorged dick. But yeah, she was funny. She was used in like 2 scenes at the beginning and then never showed up again. And so it felt kind of like weird that they had her. I felt like they should have brought her back one more time at the end, or they should have just not had her at all. It was weird that they showed her in the beginning twice, and it seemed like she would be a player in the movie, and then just never showed up again. That was kind of weird. But she was my favorite character. She was great, and I like Allison Janney. She's a very good actor. My least favorite character was the dad of the 2 sisters, for 2 reasons. Partly because I didn't like him. He's way too strict, doesn't want his girls doing anything, way too controlling, just needs to lighten up in general. But he also was very caricaturish. He had very little depth to him. This is one of those one-dimensional things I'm talking about. His only character trait is that he's the controlling dad. And I feel like they put that rule. This is one of the things that I was iffy about the writing. I feel like that rule of like, oh, neither of you can date unless both of you are dating, that feels weird. That doesn't feel like a natural rule. I feel like the writers just came up with that because they needed an obstacle. Again, I gave it a 1.6 out of 2 for the writing. If to get like a 1.8 or a 1.9, it would need to be more compelling than that, I think. But yeah, I would give 10 Things I Hate About You from 1999. I would give that a 7.9 out of 10. I recommend this movie. It's very good. It's very cute. It's very it's a very optimistic movie. And I think that's actually representative of the times. The 90s were, especially retrospectively, were a very optimistic time. There was the economy was great. I mean, we were creating millions of jobs every year, and the U.S. was running budget surpluses, meaning that we were making more money than we spent. We were at that point we were on track to pay off our debt by like 2010. There was a huge boom in music sales. They actually made a new classification for music sales. It's called Diamond. In the 1990s, there was already gold and platinum. Gold is when you sell like 500,000 copies. Platinum is 1,000,000. But they made Diamond in the 1990s because, and that's when you sell 10 million copies or more, because there were so many albums, just one after another, in the late 80s and early 90s, all through the 90s, really, up until like 2001, that were selling like 10 million copies or more. I mean, there were albums that were selling. Britney Spears and like NSYNC, those albums, they were debuting with like 1.5 million copies in the first week alone, and then 1,000,000 copies each week after that. Within 10 weeks, they obviously wouldn't sell 1,000,000 a week for 10 weeks, but within 10 weeks, at that trajectory, they could have been Diamond already. And there was also like enormous TV ratings during the late 90s. I mean, Seinfeld, Friends, ER, those were all on at the same time. All regularly drew in like 35 million viewers or more. It was just a good time for America. The Cold War, which had been America's foreign policy for like 45 years, ended in 1989. And so in 1999... capitalism, communism had fallen, and it had just been a lot more peaceful for 10 years. Even though there were military problems, there was foreign policy problems. There was a genocide in Rwanda and lots of other stuff going on. But again, just a generally optimistic time in America. It was pre 9/11. Democracy was flourishing worldwide. I think in the 1990s that was the point at which the world had the highest number of democracies that it's ever had. And so this movie, I think, is just representative of that. It's just a very feel-good movie made in a feel-good time. And I think there's probably an element of nostalgia to it, even though they don't talk about, oh, this is the 90s and good things are happening. It just feels positive and light and airy. That's why I gave it, for the personal vibe, the 1.8 out of 2. It just felt light, and it felt good watching it. Anyway, this was longer than I would have liked it to have been. I'm going to make these shorter in the future. I just wanted to explain my rubric and stuff, but I'll be more succinct in the future. Definitely recommend 10 Things I Hate About You. This is a good movie. You would be hard-pressed to find 10 things that you hate about this movie. 5 or 6 maybe. 10, I doubt it. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Remember to like and share this video and subscribe to my channel. Those all help me out a lot. And anyway, I will see you tomorrow when I review Something's Gotta Give for February 4th. Have a good night. Bye.